such a crucial person. Diana's been such a great spirit over the years. Thank you. Well, this was billed as Bishop in Time and Eternity or something like that. Time and Reality. Yeah. So I've struggled with lots of things that will actually come to you in a closing report to the Synod Assembly next May, and we'll have a more comprehensive opportunity to say thanks then. So Chris and I have just agreed we'll throw out a couple of provocations and depend on your interest in hearing more about the work and your questions about how it goes as you think about who to nominate, whether you should be a candidate, and all those important questions. The first memory I have of being a new bishop was at the coffee pot on the 11th floor of Higgins Road, ELCA in Chicago. Those of you who have been there know that that's the central meeting place next to the council room and where the bishops often meet. And my welcome to ELCA as a new bishop was from a slightly built and beautiful African-American woman with the most gorgeous braids who met me at the coffee pot and took a second look at me and said, "You're Martin Wells, aren't you?" And I said, "Why, yes, I am." And she said, "Ah, I just put you in the system." That's important, you know. I have no idea what was put in there. That was the introduction, and I thought, well, here you go. Now you're in for the ride. And that was reasonably welcome, and a beautiful smiling face to say hello. The other thing that I think I would throw out to you, because it became for me a very important thing, I was an early advocate that the bishops should meet with the scholars of the church, our teaching theologians, because we share oversight of the church. It is a partnership that has to be lively and open and fluid and juicy. And so with the advocacy of a couple of us, probably including Marcus, we managed to bring in the scholars of the church for 2 consecutive bishops' academies in January. And the way they arranged the program, and I don't remember the precise organizing principle or the question it was organized around, but they paired a theologian and a bishop to present 2 views of one particular question facing the church. And it was not long after the CCM struggle. It had to do with the authority of bishops, the organizing of bishops, all those questions that we've been through, and I'm so deeply grateful that those things have been articulated so beautifully here by Chris and Marcus and Kiersey. But I was paired with Tim Lull to present a paper to the Conference of Bishops in my 3rd year, and that was foolish. And I'm not the scholar that I have in the family with Susan, but it seemed like too good an opportunity. We met at McDonald University. Yes, that McDonald in Chicago, Illinois, McDonald's Hamburgers, has a little university there. We met in a beautiful place, and basically over 2 days or 3 days, 5 pairs of bishops and theologians presented on a particular question. And I'm sorry that I can't describe for you the organizing question, but it was the opportunity for me to try and discover for myself in a 3rd year what I thought I was doing in the office and how to summarize that in a way that would guide me for the future, be faithful and honest, and helpful perhaps to others. And I remember being at our house in Spokane the night that I discovered that my kind of career-long interest in the notion of vocation could provide the organizing principle. And so it was that I came upon 6 different words, all based in calling, vocare, places. We are ecclesia, the called out people. It was 6 descriptors that gave me confidence that I thought I had some way to understand what I was doing. The first word being invocation. And I'm deeply grateful for that because, of course, Marcus has fed us so deeply on the ministry of word and sacrament that is the beginning point for the office of bishop. But along with the notion of vocation, the second word was evocation, that work of drawing out from other people their leadership gifts so that the body could take advantage of lay and clergy together in a gifted whole as part of the body of Christ. And I hope that that has been some of the work along the way, primarily associated with synod vice presidents and others who have led our synod during these years. The third word, it won't be a surprise to you at all because you know I love being together with you in this forum. The word is convocation, where we bring together the vocations for mutual work together. And that has helped me and has been a guiding star all these years, and I'm so deeply grateful that we can end in such a high fashion today. The fourth principle is the word provocation, which in our lexicon is primarily a negative word, because when you're provoking something, somebody or something, you're irritating it. And we generally say, we don't like that, don't irritate me. But to call forth the vocation of another is holy work. And that has become an important part. And so there aren't too many places. I haven't been deeply courageous in the work. There haven't been too many places where I thought I'd been able to do that. But a few little runs at it along the way. The fifth word is revocation. And there you get into the dicey stuff of the organization, where it's the work of the bishop, as Chris so eloquently described for us, is to be the point of inquiry when ministry has gone off the rails in a servant, and there's been a misconduct of some kind. But I want to tell you the deep and abiding gospel that finally revealed itself to me under the word revocation, which is in every instance where I have gone to a pastor, I can't mandate it, but I can be as persuasive as possible. In every instance, and there have been 5 or 6 or 7 of them along the way, when I've asked a pastor to resign from the roster, the next word is, you are not bereft, because now this simply means that you return to the original baptismal call that God gave you in your life. You are still called, and we should discover for you the way that you can contribute to the body of Christ, but not as the leader in public ministry on behalf of the church. You have forfeited that, but it's not an end. And that is powerful, and I'm deeply grateful for that framing. And the final word was advocacy, the work in the public square. And there again, my lack of courage has showed up, but there have also been some moments when it's been very clear. And the most notable, as you know from our Synod Assembly 2 years ago when we all got sick in Pasco, had to do with this astounding map that I was shown by our Native American brothers and sisters of the watershed of the Snake and Columbia rivers in the Pacific Northwest. And when I looked at that map, all I could see was the state lines in it, and it almost duplicates the footprint of our synod. And in that seeing, in that moment, I saw a call from God. This synod is steward of those rivers and all those feeders. And to the extent that I have been an advocate, and I have been to 3 public hearings with state officials and others to testify against oil trains and other things, that has come directly from a sense of deep call to be steward both of the land and the people with whom I'm proud to have shared a letter of apology for the arrogance of the Anglo race in the life of tribes. And that has felt like holy work. So I'm going to stop there and just tell you, in case you didn't know, and I don't think I've spoken of it too often, that's how I found a way to organize the calling of the work, and I've been deeply grateful for that focus.
I said this morning that the constitutional requirements are too much for any one person. One of the very early learnings for me is I went home with work left on my desk. And the discovery was I often didn't get back to it the next day because the tyranny of the imminent and the immediate took over, and the ability to respond to the thoughtful work was oftentimes set aside. But I'll remember going to Vancouver, British Columbia for the March meeting of the Conference of Bishops in 2014. It was my first meeting. In those days, spouses also attended the March meeting. It was the first time the conference had come to anything close to the Northwest. Granted, it was outside the country, but they would be in the neighborhood. And the USA Today article on the paper that most of them read coming to Vancouver described how the state of Washington, in its religious preference survey, none was the most preferred religious expression. And so people got off the airplane in Vancouver and said, so what's going on in Washington that no one is interested in the faith? And I'm going, well, they've been a bishop for 3 months. Come on. Or no, 6 months. Give me a break. But it shaped me into saying, okay, my job as bishop is to remind the church in Northwest Washington that it lives in the mission field. That we are not the settled people, we are the missionary people. And I would say that much of what drove my 12 years was to say, let's explore what does it mean to be in mission with a group of people that don't care we're there. If they were opposing us, we could figure out a way of fighting back. But they don't care is really hard, because if they don't care about you, they don't oppose you, they don't like you, they just hope you don't bother them. And so that was the struggle for me in terms of how do we as a synod look at our mission field? And some of you in the room listen to me more often than not talk about the synod as being the mission field of the Northwest. But that really came out of that sense, and then Stephen Bowman later said, when we went to the Director of the Evangelical Mission format, that we needed missionary bishops. And my immediate response at that point was, oh great, another responsibility being given to us from the church-wide offices. Will they ever learn? Now I'm one of those people showing up, giving these ideas, and people say, there they come, the church-wide offices giving us more. But it struck me that that was who I was. I started my career in the church as a called pastor, as a mission developer. And I thought that as I was working in the parishes and as bishop, it was always reminding people, what's the mission field look like? And we tried some things in Northwest Washington that quite frankly failed miserably. We tried some things that are still going. And that struck me as what the church out here should be. That place where we have the crucible of trying things that you couldn't get away with back in northwestern Ohio. That's part of where I come from, and those folks wouldn't necessarily want to try some of the things that we were trying because they're busy paying for it. I think that's the other thing. We out here sometimes think, what are those dodgy people back there thinking? And they're faithfully giving their mission support to the church that's coming out to us, and we are to be stewards of that for the life of the whole church. I think the question that I still have 12 years after 12 years was, in all of our experimentation, did we put together models where people would see themselves as part of the whole church? Or did we put together models where people saw themselves as members of a community but disconnected from the whole church? Because that strikes me as one of those things we are losing, that connectedness to the whole, the Church Catholic. I hope in this 500th anniversary of the Reformation, we will begin to be able to talk about what it means to be part of the Church Catholic, and not just what does it mean to be obnoxious Lutherans. Obnoxious in the sense of we don't see ourselves as a part. We are a part of the one holy Catholic Church, and how do we help our new places and new people see that gift that they receive? That would be a challenge, I would think, for missionary bishops. So my focus was around mission, around missionary, I guess I would say raising leaders. Because when I walked in, there was only one piece of paper on my desk when I walked into the office on August 1st, 2001. It was a graph of the ages of the clergy in the Northwest Washington Synod. And 53% were between the ages of 55 and 65. And so we suddenly said we need to find new leaders. And how will we emphasize candidacy? And how will we be honest? So for me, the goals of candidacy and new mission were the driving factors of what the church was about to be about. Questions? I'm getting the voice in the questions, comments, reactions.
What one piece of paper would you leave for the next bishop?
On this, I would say the next bishop was someone who was a good friend, who was a mentor for me when I was in the parish. It sort of came full circle. The one piece of paper I would have left, I think I would have echoed my wife at that point. Make sure your wife is not eating home alone too often. My sense was that Bishop Untai had a fairly good sense of what the church and what the office was about. I didn't need to leave him that piece of paper, but I probably would have said, pay attention to your family. I did say that, but it was not on a piece of paper. Ron.
For either of you, both of you, all three of you, what surprised you most? If you haven't already, when you got into the office, at least prepared for it.
What surprised me most? I think those places where I suddenly had instant authority. There were congregations of the Synod when I walked in and said things and people thought, it has been decided. And then there were most of the congregations in Northwest Washington that said, that's your opinion. And I was, quite frankly, more prepared for the second answer than the first. Because I'm one of those people that wants people to challenge me and not just accept what I say. I mean, I was a debater in college. I do believe that as you engage ideas and have people challenge you, you both grow. Unlike the current political debate where we don't talk, we just yell. And so I expected that, and to find those places, and there were a few of those where, well, the bishop has said, yeah, so, I mean, that was a surprise. I think the other thing was the surprise of being in the Conference of Bishops. My class was the largest new class in the conference since the forming of the church. There were 17 of us. 15 that were expected and 2 surprises, and I was one of the latter. There had been tension in the conference in the past over bishops, that new bishops who were elected over an incumbent bishop seeking re-election. And there I will say that Don Meyer did such a marvelous job of preparing the conference to receive me that the horror stories that I had heard didn't occur. But there was a sense that you needed to be in the conference for at least 2 or 3 years before you opened your mouth. You were to sit there and watch, and as you figured out how it went, then you would participate publicly. That myth went away in the class that Elizabeth Eaton and Dick Graham, I think who else? There were 3 in that class that came in and said, wait 3 years, we'll be halfway done at that point, I have something to say now. And that whoever will be the new bishop will want your voice immediately. Do not wait 3 years. But that was a bit of a surprise too.
I think the thing that was there, I had 2 things in my mind. The first, the one that I can remember, is that my model of Episcopal leadership was Cliff Lundy, district president for the ALC, headquartered out of Seattle, and he had been so deeply kind to Susan and me in offering us, or arranging for us to be candidates for our first call at Our Savior's Lutheran in Bellingham, where the year before a pastor had caused misconduct, the second in 5 years, and we were entrusted with that congregation, and that was, but he was, to my way of thinking, he was so deeply beloved that I was thrown off and surprised and dismayed by not exactly overt hostility, but certainly a good deal of skepticism about goodwill. And so I have concluded easily over the years that the very hardest provision of all those provisions that Chris took you through today, the very hardest provision is the second that he described. And it doesn't say this explicitly, but the implication is you are standing between pastor and congregation. And that is the pinch point. That is the hardest place to be. And I really don't like it, because you have access to the whole story, and you want so deeply for these parties to get along, but sometimes it just doesn't work. So we can offer more provocations, or we can continue taking your questions. Do you have anything that you'd like to know, or should I just offer something else? Laura?
I have a question for Chris. You said you became bishop on August 1st
Yes?
of 2001.
Yes?
So how did 9/11 hit you? I mean, as a brand new bishop and your public role.
Well, you need to know that I was driving Dee Dee to University of Washington Hospital Medical Center, where she served as the risk manager when we saw the second plane go in. We got in the car and started driving, and by the time we got to Seattle, the first tower came down. And then the second tower came down. And then we heard about the plane going into the Pentagon. My brother-in-law worked in the Pentagon, just outside where the plane went down. And we couldn't reach him. Now, he was at not even anywhere near the Pentagon that day, but it was one of those days of not believing what I was hearing because I couldn't see anything, and suddenly wondering what happened to my brother-in-law. And I, for whatever reason that day, and I don't know why, I wore clerics that day. I, in the parish, only wore clerics on days when I was doing some kind of word and sacrament function. I was not one who wore clerics every day. But for whatever reason, that day I was wearing clerics, and I was walking down Finney Avenue to get lunch, and 3 people stopped me and asked me to pray for them that day. And it suddenly hit me that as bishop I had a public office. And I wore clerics every day for the next 12 years when I went to work. Because it was a sign to people of who I am and what I've been called to do. That was the biggest effect. The other effect then was just how to respond to the synod. I will say the opportunity, and I think Marcus, you're the one who brought it up, of going to Metro New York and the Sunday after Easter in 2002, and being with the pastors and leaders of the Metro New York and New Jersey Synod is something I'll always remember. Maynard Attic was the pastor of Trinity in Brooklyn. He had been a good friend, is a good friend, and I originally said I wasn't going, and then I got an email from Maynard, and he was bleeding all over that email. And I said, okay, I'm going to Trinity. We had a service at Madison Avenue Presbyterian Church. All the bishops were doing everything that would be done in a service, from ushering to everything. I mean, we arrived late at the church, and the police bus that I was on, and there were bishops looking at their watches like they were head ushers looking at the ushers that had arrived late. I mean, it was one of those, this is just what it means to be Lutheran, I guess. And Bob Rimbaud, who was then the bishop in the Southeastern Michigan Synod, had organized the service and decided that since I was the tallest bishop, I would be the crucifer. And I was standing on the upper step holding the cross, and I looked down, and in the second row, Father John Dom is sitting there, who had been my liturgics prof. And this procession of all the clergy from Metro New York and New Jersey and all the bishops is going on and on and on, and I'm standing there with the cross thinking, I wonder if my stole is straight. And looking at Father John and then going, Chris, you're a bishop, he's not grading you. But being there with those people was a holy honor. And then to be there the next day, the president of the congregation of Trinity Brooklyn had been killed when the second plane hit the tower. And by the time we got there, the towers were now being referred to as the pit. And the psalm for the second Sunday of Easter is, you will not abandon your servant to the pit. And it was read by his son. And then I got to preach. So, that was a case where I think the bishops ministered to the synod, and in that way we demonstrated how we minister to the church. Other questions?
This is a story for Kiersey. I have several organizing principles for my work, but one of the other prayer forms for me has to do with a panoply of saints named Martin. And I don't know how I came on this, but it occurred to me at some point that I needed prayer partners, and I just decided that my name itself might serve as a connection through the centuries. And so one of my saints has always been Martin of Tours. And Martin of Tours, the story goes, because this comes because you were supposing there are a variety of ways bishops have been elected. The apocryphal story of Martin of Tours is that the townspeople decided they wanted to make him bishop, and he fled. He ran away. And he tried to hide in a poultry house. And it was the honking of the geese that gave him away. And they seized him and took him home and made him bishop. So the rest of the story is that you may know that Martin of Tours is the patron saint of France, right? Guess what? Martin of Tours Day, November 11th, for which Martin Luther is named, his birthday being on November 10th, is a national holiday in France, and the traditional dish is goose. Isn't that great? There's a little spirituality there. It seeps into the culture in a whimsical way that I think is really fun. This is about the office of bishop. I hope you have questions that might inform how that goes. Yes?
Well, I don't know about this as what you just said, but we've heard a lot about the Constitution and what the bishop does and the difficulties and all that. I'm all for hearing some stories about life-giving times in your time as bishop. What were the times that you were just like, yeah, God is here? If you can tell some of those.
I hope each of you has this experience. And it happened to me again yesterday. So there's a pattern here that might be helpful. It's no mistake that the notion of convocation is dear to my heart. When Susan and I meant to mention earlier that Heidi Lorman and Susan Briel are available for questions as well if you have a sense that what happens in a family is critical. Please ask. I called Susan Briel from my very early cell phone in Chris Knutson Hall at Pacific Lutheran University on the evening that we were bringing the film critic from the News Tribune to campus to talk with a group of very roiled up students about the movie The Last Temptation of Christ. I don't know if you remember, but that really swept across things and lots of people were stirred up. We were on a campus that had university congregation, a wonderful place. We had Trinity Lutheran across the street, but circling the campus on Sunday mornings were buses taking students off campus to the local flavor of the evangelical megachurch that was doing well. So we really had a mixed, and then there was the football church on lower campus too. But I had a sense that night, and it was my idea to call for this forum. I had a sense that night, as that was just coming together, maybe 40 minutes before the event starts, you could feel the energy coming up, you could feel the agitation, everything's going, and I thought, I called Susan and said, I am in the center of God's will for my life, right now. And that happened last night too. Here, with you, in good conversation and collegiality and kindness towards one another. That would be the high point I would point to. Us being together in conversation, mutual enrichment, consolation, care for one another. I had a pastor tell me this morning, I'm so deeply grateful, Matthew, that said, I've never been among a bunch of pastors who were so non-competitive. How cool is that? We're on one another's side here.
In the course of 12 years, I ordained 53 pastors. But the one that stick out to me were two Latino immigrants from Mexico who started work in Skagit County and who were supported through Holden Village. There were lots of questions about whether we could ordain them or not because they were undocumented. And we went to the legal beagles and the office of the secretary and said, is there any reason why we can't ordain these two wonderful leaders of the church? And we were told, no, the church, ordination is something the church does, and the federal government really has nothing to say about that. You're at safe grounds there, but whoever employs them will be breaking the law. So you can't pay them. Okay? So we went to the community and said, this is where we are. And the treasurer looked at me and said, Bishop, you realize 90% of the people in this room are not documented. We'll pay them. You ordain them. And so I did. No, the church did. And there were 53 pastors from the Northwest Washington Synod who showed up for that ordination, the most that ever showed up for an ordination in that synod. And it was a night when the Spirit of God moved across the people, and we all said, it is good to be here. And I had the opportunity to be the person who presided at worship, but it was God at work. Other questions, or do I need to, should I think of another provocation?
Remind me, we elect the bishop in May, and when does the bishop begin the work?
Well, if your constitution is like most of them, it's the first day of the third month. So September 1. There are two synods in the ELCA that it's the first day of the second month. One of them is Northwest Washington. So I thought I was going to start September 1, and Lowell Ullman, who was the churchwide rep, looked at me and he said, no, you will be in Indianapolis at the churchwide assembly, you start the 1st of August. So I went back and had 6 weeks to leave the congregation. That's unfair. So the first day of the third month is the start date, so September 1.
We don't have an installation date yet, but I was installed later in September of the year that I started. I actually was paid from the middle of August because I too went to a churchwide assembly, and so the Synod Council, so it may be that the bishop is, if available and it's possible, could start in August on the payroll, but would have overlap time when I'm done August 31.
So related to that, is there an inelegantly put a brain dump that you offer for the next bishop to transfer as much downloaded information as possible?
I got two things from Bishop Keller, a wonderful guy who I've admired for many years. He and Rob Hofstad and Dave Steen were the first group of 3 pastors who co-pastored a parish in Olympia, Washington in a team and didn't kill one another. So Bob Keller was a hero in my book. It wasn't easy to be part of a team in those days. I only got 2 things from Bob. We had half a day together. He was full of goodwill, but there were actually 3 things. He insisted that the Monday after I was elected, I come and tell the staff whether they were fired or not. And of course, I just begged everybody to stay in place. The second thing I got was the box of files on misconducts that are kept in the safe. And he took me through those things. As I see him nod, the third thing he did was tell me what a wonderful partner Mark Nelson was. And the fourth thing is apocryphal, but I'm pretty sure it's true. The story is that when he got to the top of Snoqualmie Pass, driving west toward the wet side, he got to the top of Snoqualmie Pass and stopped the car and got out in the parking lot and turned to the east and yelled, "Not my problem!"
And I did the same thing from Tacoma to Seattle, so I would encourage you to figure out where you're going to do that. say in my case, the file drawer of misconduct was larger in Northwest Washington, so it was a day-long time for me. And I would say with Kirby and Ty, I went through the file drawers. And quite frankly, that's difficult because many of the files in the file drawers are not about discipline. They're about allegations that may well have been proven to be untrue, but the files need to be kept. And you suddenly get files about close friends that you know you need to keep in confidence. And that was the realization that you carry knowledge for the health of the church that you carry. You cannot and will not act on it, but the bishop must know it. And so that was a part of it. The other piece that Kirby will tell you is I identified 7 situations that I said, you'll probably have to deal with these sometime in your first year. And when the 7th one happened, 6 months into his tenure, he said, there isn't anything you're not telling me, right? Yes, there's an information dump. No, there's a way of talking about what's happening in the church so that the bishop is not caught by surprise. Because quite frankly, from my perspective, a bishop caught by surprise is probably not going to do their best thinking at that moment. And so it's important that information be shared so that a bishop does not respond with surprise. The other thing is there will be, and I don't know, with only one, have they identified who the mentor bishop is going to be in Region 1? Have you done the stare down on that? One of the bishops of Region 1 will be assigned to be a mentor for the new bishop. And the new bishop will come to Chicago for a week in July. So elected in May, come to July, and all of the other bishop-elects will be there. And it's now a week-long formation event where Martin and I basically got information, and Marcus got information dumps from all the units of the church. The Conference of Bishops has now taken responsibility for that event and turned it more into a formation event that, yes, the secretary will come in and spend 2 hours talking about the manual of policies and procedures for the management of the roster. A document I didn't even know existed, but Synod offices need to know what's there. The various units will be coming in, but also talking about the relation. You may or may not know that there's a relational agreement amongst the bishops of the ELCA on how we will act with each other. It does not have constitutional force. It's not approved by the church council. It is a mutual covenant amongst the bishops. It's not a secret document. You can go on to the ELCA, Office of the Presiding Bishop, Synodical Relations, and one of the resources there is the relational agreement. So there is a sort of in-depth going through the relational agreement. And one of the things that bishops need to know is if a congregation in Northwest Washington would invite Bishop Wells to come and preach, he won't do that unless he informs Bishop Untie that he's coming that day. Bishops don't show up on other people's territory unannounced. They are always welcome to the best of my knowledge, but there is a mutual agreement that we won't do that. There's also a mutual agreement that we will not send pastors back and forth or roster leaders back and forth without disclosing issues that maybe should be known. So it's not a case of, let's see, I'm not sure I like this pastor, let me see if I can pawn it off on Bishop Wells. No, we have agreed we would not do that. There are lots of other things in the relational agreement, but that's another piece, that orientation. I used to call it Bishop's Preschool, because it felt like you were grabbing the rope and walking down the hall in line with the teachers helping you get from place to place. But it begins that formation within the Conference of Bishops. And the mentors and the new bishops together are there. So it's not just the new people going, what's this all about? But the mentors are there to share the story as well as the church-wide staff.
And if there is a spouse involved in if the person if the person elected has a spouse, that spouse is also given a mentor. And that is really important work. I've been the mentor for Kim Untai. Herb Martin is the mentor for Kirby, who apparently didn't need a lot of mentoring. But Kim needed a lot of prayer and support and encouragement and consolation. So in some ways, I think my job of mentoring Kim has gone on much longer than Martin's job, Martin's privilege of mentoring Kirby. But just to say, if you have a spouse or are a spouse, you are not bereft. Right? And that mentoring, I did not have a mentor. That mentoring came later. But I think it rose out of a deep necessity and desire.
In the parlance of the Bishop's Academy and the Bishop's Conference, Bishop Untai was demented early. And as I understand it, his worst shock, and this is part of the information you need to know, the policy of this synod is that the bishop is paid at the top of the salary range for the synod pay guidelines, 4 years of experience, plus 10%. That will be the salary for the bishop. So figure out how many years of experience you've got, what's the top of that range, add 10%, that's what the job will pay. Bishop Untai took a $20,000 or $30,000 cut in pay to become bishop. We came from Holden, Susan says.
I'm trying to find a way to say it as broadly as possible, because I do want to hear from Susan and Heidi, because you have unique experience, but please feel free to say no. But what are one or two things that you would want us to know that you've picked up from seeing the bishop? And go as far or wide from that question as you want.